The four gods of One Piece: the sun, earth, forest, and rain gods. First named during the Skypiea arc, they remain some of the most mysterious characters in the One Piece world, but were they only truly myths? Because it's kind of looking more and more likely that the gods of One Piece are real, and not only that there are way more than just four of them. Because recently I went through the entire series again, reading it in Japanese, and today I really want to explain all of the gods in One Piece right now, starting with the sun god Nika. This guy is of course the basis for Luffy's Devil Fruit. He's the warrior of liberation who brings laughter and dancing wherever he goes, and for generations the enslaved populations of the One Piece world have prayed to Nika, hoping that he'll arrive to finally set them free. The sun god seems to represent a lot of things, but mostly it's really about freedom. Since the Nika fruit gives its user this rubbery body and the ability to fight with the power of imagination itself, we can safely assume that the OG Nika probably could do as well. Now, Nika is usually depicted wielding weapons like a spear or a sword, and often a shield as well, and what's especially strange for a sun god is how connected he seems to be to the moon instead, with Luffy transforming for the first time under a full moon, the Minks gaining a very Gear 5 appearance with like white fur and red eyes under the full moon as well, and we also know that the world government absolutely fears Nika and even tried to erase the name of the fruit, so he seems to kind of be a really big deal. However, despite the best efforts of the world government, Nika is still being worshipped by many groups around the world, such as the Buccaneers like Kuma and on islands like Elbaph, where the Giants see him both as this liberator and destroyer figure present for the endings of the first and second worlds. These people, kind of like me, do hit that Nika on a daily. Is that kind of like a Mario pose? Anyways, much of the information about the sun god comes from Elbaph's Harley text here. But Nika isn't the only god, of course, listed there, because there's also the earth god, the forest god, and the god of rain / the sea. And at this point in the story, the only other one of these four central gods next to Nika who's actually been given a real name so far is now the rain goddess Zaza. And for the celestial dragons who live very high above the ocean, above the clouds, the very idea of a rain deity seems to be a horror story that they tell their children. And using his ability to bring dreams and nightmares to life, the Holy Knight Saint killing him actually created a dream monster version of Zaza, drawing on his very own fear. Interestingly, Killingham's manifestation of Zaza appears as this beautiful woman wearing a casa-style Japanese straw rain hat. She has 4 arms made out of water, and what's kind of unclear is whether there is a devil fruit as well based on Zaza, kind of like there is one for Nika. Well, really, a lot of things are still unclear about the 4 gods. For example, we don't even know for certain that they actually ever really physically existed in the real world, or whether the devil fruit powers are just based on mythologies. But if I had to guess one person right now who might have already eaten a rain god devil fruit, my guess would be Monkey D. Dragon, right? Who's the celestial dragon's real worst nightmare and has consistently been associated with storms like the one that tore through Loketown when he pulled up to save Luffy. Weirdly enough though, the rain goddess Zaza might not be the only water-based deity in the One Piece world out there, because there might also be a sea god. Like, both are obviously associated with water, but until Killingham brought Zaza to life, we'd really only heard of a rain god during the Skypiea flashback, right? The Nolan one. However, it turns out that there are instead plenty of mentions of a sea god as well, and it's still kind of unclear whether the rain god and the sea god are kind of the same deity or not, but with 2 different names. For example, in the Harley text, the Elbaphian myth of Nika, it says that not the rain, but the sea god storms after man kills the sun. Could this hint at a relationship maybe between the sea god and Joy Boy, the wielder of the Nika powers during the Void Century, presumably? Is the sea god potentially connected to the ancient weapon Poseidon, which itself, of course, is also named after the Greek god of the sea? And since Imu has stated that there is not really a difference between devils and gods in the series, is the sea god the same as that sea devil mentioned in the very first chapter of One Piece, who causes devil fruit users to lose their ability to swim? It kind of feels like that might be the case. one other thing that we know for sure is that some people in the One Piece world absolutely do seem to worship a sea god, as we see, for example, at the beginning of the Thriller Bark arc and in Jinbei's cover story, in which residents of a very certain island, or multiple islands, have this very large torii gate, like the Shinto-style gate, dedicated to the sea god and regularly sent these offerings into the ocean. One of these ones that actually is a lure, a fake one that the Straw Hats open and thus summon Thriller Bark. Basically, Moria's entire stick was having these fake offerings to a sea god with, like, people would expect some food or water in it, but actually it was a flare, and so, that would then tell them the location of the ship. Now, another god mentioned in the Harley text is the forest god. Specifically, the second world section of the text states that the forest god tamed demons, or more literally translated, sent forth his demons, which to me seems to imply that the forest god may have just been the person to create devil fruits to begin with during the Void Century. Because, not to brag, but in my dendrology class, I actually learned that fruit grow on trees, and trees, it turns out, live in forests. Just hard science. And so that raises a big question about these gods, because Dr. Vegapunk seems to suggest that devil fruits are a type of technology. So does that mean that these gods aren't really so much divine beings, but more like people or individuals with access to some crazy advanced tech that seemed godlike to the normal inhabitants of the Blue Planet? Also, right now, if you just forced me to make a guess who has a potential forest god fruit, I would have to go right now with a Boku wa Doctor, Tony Chopper right here, because his fruit is getting more and more weird, man. Like, it's the only human fruit that apparently it's not mythical. He doesn't have a strict human form, always being some kind of human reindeer, furries, like Sasquatch hybrid thing. Oh, and he can also randomly cancel out a Domi Reversi transformation with his mere touch, hence taming demons, maybe? Like, there's definitely something fishy going on, and, I think Chopper would just be a very logical fit. And the fourth of the original four main gods of the One Piece world that we first knew about is, of course, the Earth God. Now, in the first world, he seemed to have control over the Forbidden Sun, somewhere hidden deep within the Earth. It seems like he might have been the one to enslave the world's population, then forcing them to harvest this power, but then got real big mad when Nika showed up to harsh his vibe. He summoned the Hellflame Serpent, most likely, to fight alongside him against his fellow god, and the resulting battle ended the first One Piece world, plunging it into fire and darkness. Now, obviously, there's still a lot we gotta learn about all these four gods, like the names of the earth and the forest gods, and who really embodies all of these roles in the current Third World era. For example, I'm pretty sure that Imu might occupy one of these god spots, probably. He could still be the Sea Devil or the Forest God, but if I was a betting man, I would still go with the Earth God because, he rules the planet and he lives on a giant slab of Earth on top of the world. But one thing seems for absolutely certain: despite having the powers of the literal devil, Imu is effectively the real god of the One Piece world. In his own words, gods, devils, what's the difference? So the power that he gets from the Devil Fruit gives him untold godly power. He can manipulate dark omen flames into any shape that he desires, transform people into demons with Domi Reversi, and just craft unbreakable covenants with the most dedicated subjects he has. He controls crazy amounts of different powers related to the Dark Abyss, and when he showed up in Elbaph, the landscape itself literally came to life and began singing a haunting song upon his arrival. That being said now, the four gods of One Piece, plus minus Imu, hardly are the only gods we learn about in the One Piece story by a big shot. For example, Loki's predecessor, who also had the Nidhogg powers, was known as the War God of Elbaph. This legendary figure wielded the mighty hammer Ragnir, fought alongside Ratatoskr the squirrel, and also had the Nidhogg fruit, and at one point, this same war god did battle with the sun god Nika, though I will say, based on some of the timeline details in the story, I kind of have a feeling that that might have actually been Joy Boy using the Nika fruit rather than the original Nika, assuming again that Nika lived in the first and not the second world, or that there even was an original Nika that was walking and talking at all. Also, I feel really strongly that we have a good idea that the war god's actual name might have been Elbaph, the guy so legendary that they named an entire country after him. The main piece of evidence for this is that during the Little Garden arc, Dory specifically refers to the war god Elbaph, as in Elbaph as being his name, but you'd be forgiven for forgetting that small detail like 1,000 chapters later. But then there are also all the other mythical zones that seem to be based on deities, like most of which definitely feel like they're based on these godly figures. Kaido's Azure Dragon, or Seiryu fruit, is based on a significant dragon god from Chinese and Japanese mythology, absolutely part of the pantheon of, their respective myths. Sengoku's Golden Buddha fruit is based on, well, the Buddha, another god. Yamato's Okochi no Makami is based on a guardian deity of the Yamato province in Japan. The Phoenix, Ratatoskr, Nidhogg, all of these, especially if every devil fruit is based on a being that once actually existed in the One Piece world, could be considered gods or deities in their own right as well, especially if they were once real. Now, of course, there are also plenty of other characters in One Piece that have the title of god, even though they're not literally divine beings, right? Like for this video specifically, I kind of wanted to focus on characters who really could be treated something like a god in the story, so just having the title of god doesn't really count. Sorry to characters like the Sky Knight Ganfall, who's god, and the Sword God Ryuma, who all have god in their titles or epithets, but it just wouldn't feel right not at least to mention my boy Enel here, right? During Skypiea, Electric Slim Shady was the first character that we truly saw with powers that kind of felt godlike, especially to the people who lived on Sky Island. His observation haki and then his crazy lightning devil fruit gave him near omniscience and omnipresence across the island, and the fact that his fruit was a Logia meant that no one except his absolute heart counter, Luffy, could even ever touch him. The man also just wholeheartedly believed that he was a god, but ironically, this false god would then be dethroned by the real sun god. And there's also another character who many people in the One Piece world seem to believe is a god, our Lord and Savior, God Usopp, of course, who defeated Sugar here and freed the multitudes of Dressrosa from an eternity trapped as forgotten toys. Now, thanks to that, Usopp's new nickname even made it onto his wanted poster, becoming known officially as a god throughout the world. Kind of. Which, if you ask me, that's pretty hype, which actually also just happens to be a new YouTube feature on mobile that seems to really help much more than anything else if you want to support these videos. So if you're enjoying the channel and everything, do me a big favor and press that hype button, like sliding to the left of the like. It does make a big difference. Then, of course, we just have an entire race of beings who wore the title of God, specifically the Lunarians, because when Marco talks about the Lunarians, he says that when they used to live there, on top of the Red Line, it was known as the Land of the Gods. And while the Celestial Dragons, who of course currently live there, like to consider themselves being gods of this world too, it kind of seems like they just really stole that title when they took that spot from the Lunarians at some point in the past. Also, based on the fact that they're one of the winged races and that they have Luna in their name, they're most likely from the moon as well originally, and these super powerful, very clearly technologically crazy advanced beings from another celestial body were very likely being viewed as godly beings by the inhabitants of the original blue planet when they came down from the sky to harvest the resources of the planet. In fact, cards on the table, this is kind of why part of me suspects that the 4 original gods, like Nika, Zaza, etc., we went over at the beginning of the video, might not be literal godly beings, but instead they might have just been, parts of this race of crazy advanced tech people that the blue planet just didn't understand, that looked like magic, so they just came to be revered as gods in the legends that followed. In fact, the original sun god Nika and the other gods could have been Lunarians who colonized the planet, and their perceived godlike power might have come from wielding the ancient weapons. Also, speaking of the ancient weapons, they're also all connected to 3 other gods. Now, I already mentioned one ancient weapon in this video, Poseidon, as a possible candidate for the sea god, but in any case, who are Poseidon and King Neptune, for that matter, actually named after? Well, the ancient weapons, it turns out, canonically are all named after gods that have that name in One Piece. Like, not just gods in the real world, gods in the One Piece world as well. And we actually get that explanation twice. First, when Crocodile first brings up the name of Pluton on Alabasta, he actually explains to us that it's named after the god of death, after a god in the One Piece world. Like the ancient weapon carries the name of a god. And then later on Fishman Island, King Neptune states again that the ancient weapons Pluton, Uranus, and Poseidon all actually bear the names of ancient gods. Now, does naming these characters after Greek and Roman gods imply that those gods are worshipped somewhere in the One Piece world that maybe doesn't have the other four gods? After all, Poseidon is named for the Greek god of the sea, Uranus the god of the sky, and Pluton after the Roman god of the underworld, so did these three gods actually also exist, maybe with the sun, earth, forest, and sea god at some point in the past? Or are they also just simply myths and legends? Or maybe were these weapons and their names just synonymous with gods who used their power to cause untold destruction in the past as well? Could be an option. Again, people like the Lunarians potentially, who once ruled over the world as gods from atop the Red Line, using the Forbidden Sun to power these machines, they could have gained their reputation as godly beings by wielding the ancient weapons, which were then named after the gods the people of the Blue Planet already worshipped at that point. Or it could also be the other way around, and the myths of these gods then came about because of the ancient weapons in the first place. Also, fitting in line with all of that, we also kinda have to talk about the Gorosei, who get to be on this list for two reasons and not just one. Because it turns out that the 5 elder planets are named after the planets. Yeah, but what are the planets named after? That's right, it's once again the gods. And since we do know that the solar system and its planets in the One Piece world don't really seem to line up with the real world solar system, thanks to the planetary model in the Library of Ohara, did these names also come from gods? I mean, we've got Mercury for Mercury, Venus, Juro, Marcus, Mars, Shepherd, Jupiter, right? And then 6 feet under Saturn. They, along with the Holy Knights, have been gifted with divine abyssal contract power through Imu and rule over the world as gods. It's in their titles. They're known as the warrior gods of agriculture and finance, etc. And if that wasn't enough, they also seem to have these mythical zones or mythical powers based on these supernatural yokai monsters, and then also a giant sandworm. Then there's also the Hellflame Serpent. Is that thing a god? Or is the Hellflame Serpent just a big monster that's controlled by the Earth God? At this point on the main channel, I've made like 10 different theory videos about this creature alone, and I'm still no closer to truly unraveling it, and it really won't be until Oda gives us some real answers. But perhaps the most mysterious god in all of One Piece, well, that would be the devil. No. Not Imu's weird devil transformation. I still think he's probably the Earth God or using some other like power that he stole. No, I mean the literal devil from the Bible, Satan. Because during the time skip, in case you remember, Brook got Kuma'd over to Nakamura Island, where a bunch of people just thought that they'd summon Satan and began worshipping Brook. And if you combine this fact with all of the weirdly Catholic nuns that we get in places like Whiskey Peak, and the fact that Usopp holds a cross in Thriller Bark to ward off evil, and Kuma's Bible, I've kind of got to ask, are there actually just like Christians in One Piece? I guess that Kuma's Bible specifically doesn't count towards this, since we learned that he's actually a devout follower of Nika, but Christianity, or a version of it, seems to somehow exist in One Piece to the extent that there are also Satanists to counter them. And let's also not forget that the 2 giant trees, one of which houses Elbaph itself and the other most likely being Marijua, are named the Adam and Eve trees. And I gotta say, while this video specifically is meant to give you a taste of the many gods that actually seem to exist in the One Piece world, there's actually way more detail to go into, especially with Nika, who we started with, and in this video, we go in like real detail on everything else we know about him, and that like who this person might have been in the past, because there's way more than I could fit into like the introduction that we had for this video, so go check that one out. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching, and again, hype the video, like, comments with stuff you want to see, and I will hopefully see you in the next one next Friday. Until then, have a great day.